With reference to a freehand drawing of a floor plan, we will create a floor plan in Adobe Illustrator. First, we need to turn to Preferences and determine our units of measure, which would be millimeters. Our grid needs to be spaced at every 10 millimeters with 10 subdivisions. Get to know your shortcuts for the grid and for guides. You also need to understand that you can snap to a grid or snap to a point. If you don't have any control about where things are going, it's usually because it's snapping to the grid or snapping to a point. Both those features can be turned off. You'll need to access the architectural symbols document and use one of the three floor plan dimensions if they are convenient for you, or you can adjust them slightly to suit your needs. I'm going to align the perimeter of this floor plan to my grid. Now, I haven't organized the snap function, so I'll do that now. So I'm going to snap to grid and try that again, and you'll see that it controls exactly where the line is going and where it's been positioned. The best way to work in Illustrator is by creating layers and working in layers. So we can create at least 4 or 5, as many as you need, layers, and then name them for the different features you'll be drawing up. You'll find the easiest way to begin is by laying out the furniture. In order to rotate your furniture, there's 2 ways you can do this. Select your piece of furniture, then hover on the corner and you'll see a curved arrow. You can then rotate by holding the Shift key, and will constrain the degree of that rotation to 0, 45 and 90. Otherwise, use the Transform tool to reflect. Understand that if you're copy and pasting the perimeter from the symbols document, you'll find that the outline of that floor plan is in fact a particular kind of offset. So you'll notice in stroke there are 3 ways you can offset a line: centrally, inwardly, or outwardly. This particular selection is outwardly, because that way you get exact proportions inside the rooms. Let's begin with internal walls. We can put our grid up and have snap to grid, and understanding our difference between external and internal walls at 1 to 100 is 3 millimeters for external walls and 1 millimeter for internal walls. Hold your Shift key, you can create straight lines with the line tool, or you can use the pen tool, or you can use the rectangle tool. Different rooms will require some adjustment. You might need to use the scissors or the Add Anchor Point pen tool to make modifications. Following the placement of major pieces of furniture, the next most important thing is placing door openings. Door openings will determine exactly where walls begin and finish. So it's important to understand that where you place them initially won't be exactly where they end up. You can flip any object using the Transform Reflect tool. You can do this vertically or horizontally, then drag it into position. What you'll discover is that that little white rectangle, which blocks out the wall to create an opening, is actually too narrow. This particular symbol was created for internal walls at 1 millimeter. So we've got 3 millimeters, so we've got to create a little white rectangle that's at least 3 millimeters wide. We can fix this by creating a layer beneath the layer where the door is pasted onto, and create a rectangle or a line 3 millimeters or more wide. If you are having problems aligning your new opening with the wall, then you may have to check your snap to grid and turn that off, or you can make that line thickness or rectangle wider. You may need to tweak the position of the door, just move it up or down as necessary, but make sure that the door actually opens at the edge of the wall opening. Just move it left or right, just get it right. You may also need to adjust the opening just by tweaking it left or right, making bigger or smaller as necessary. Here I've locked the layer with the door symbol and was able to change the dimension of that white box. Now that the front door is provisionally in place, we can start mapping out the next wall. Okay, now this wall was done pretty quickly and roughed in more or less. Now it has to be corrected, or the anchor points now need to be aligned. Have the snap to grid function on, align anchor point to anchor point, and make sure that the wall thickness, the internal wall thickness, is not protruding beyond the thickness of the external wall, making an additional width. Once you've done that, you can just position the objects within that space. Then continue with your wall construction. As mentioned earlier, your major constraint is the door opening. So you've got to accommodate the door, then adjust the wall position so things come together nicely. Now, it means rooms may have to become bigger or smaller, but things have to change in order to fit the door. What follows is the modification of this quite a complex arrangement of walls and doors. So there's a variety of ways you can tackle this. One is using the scissors tool, where you can cut into sections of line, or you can use the pen tool to add new anchor points. This enables you then just to relocate those anchors using the direct selection tool. A lot of what I've been doing to this point has been just trial and error. However, you need to make sure if you go to Object, Transform, Scale, that you've unchecked scale strokes. If you haven't unchecked scale strokes, then what's going to happen is as you change the size of something, it's either going to become thicker, longer, wider, but disproportionately to what you really want it to be. Because you're working to scale of 1 to 100, your 1 millimeter line must remain 1 millimeter. Therefore, if you have that box checked to scale up, then what's going to happen is as you make the line longer, it'll also become wider. If you make the line shorter, it'll become narrower. So make sure you've unchecked that particular box in Object, Transform, Scale. Now, in doing the kitchen, you've got to consider the depth of the bench. Create those rectangles 700 millimeters deep. The fridge can be the same. I've got to do some more tweaking because this particular kitchen is now spilling over the doorway, so things have to shift. That's looking better, but we have to now knock out the fill of those benches so we can actually see the sink and the stovetop. Time to let some light in. So we'll need 2 windows, one in the bedroom, one in the living space. Now once we zoom in, we'll find that the window symbol isn't aligning with the wall, and this is because of the stroke is offset outwardly rather than inwardly. So you can change that so it is aligned with the thickness of the wall. Okay, so that's enough for now. In the next video, we'll do dimensioning.